We preview the Baltimore Ravens Week 16 matchup with the Atlanta Falcons coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire, and we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making us your first listen here on Locked On Ravens. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube. So be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. We're 50 away from 3,000 right now, so that's super awesome and super cool. But also be sure to follow along with us in audio form as well. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for Locked On Ravens listeners. Get 10% off of your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. We're back, and we are going to be previewing this Atlanta Falcons game that is honestly has a lot more meaning now that Baltimore lost in Week 15. Here to do it with me is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail. And Q, starting on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, the big story we've been talking about for weeks here is the quarterback and just who is it going to be? Who is it going to be? And we now know after Thursday's injury report that it will be Tyler Huntley. Now, there was a bit of worry because Huntley got out of the injury report on Wednesday, so they're thinking, is this going to be an Anthony Brown game? But Lamar Jackson ruled out again with his knee injury. It's going to be Tyler Huntley time. Are you confident, Q, that Tyler Huntley can bounce back and perform better than we saw him perform in Week 15?
I have some reservations from the fact of the weather, and I have noticed that his arm strength from getting the ball or pushing it down the field has been not quite there. And when I first saw him throw in Denver, he was making some sideline throws and some other throws, but then, recently it seems that real quickly kind of went away. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. So the weather factor is what has me, pressing the pause button. But I think, competency, the competitiveness is going to be there. The mental locked in. I mean, dude is like, I think he's locked in all the time when it comes to like, all right, cool. How do I need to, put the guys in position? Really outside of the Devin Duvernay, but I guess that's just was simply because it was hit off of I think Kevin Zeitler's thigh on that particular jet sweep. But other than that, it seems like the processing of plays, it comes smooth for him. So it's what they're going to have to face and do, and you need to get this victory. So put yourself in the competitive position of AFC North, holding form, and then from the playoff aspect of things, trying to clinch that playoff spot.
Right, and for really ever since their bye, the Ravens passing offense has been in shambles for the most part. I mean, even when Lamar was in there, they experienced some turmoil. The fourth quarter of Jacksonville, that was, they were finally starting to put points on the board, but we saw like Carolina and Jacksonville, we saw a ton of drops in those two games. We've seen that kind of sprinkled in also. But I think if there was a bounce back game in store for this pass offense, I feel like this is one of the better opponents you can play. Atlanta right now is 30th in the NFL in net yards per attempt, giving up 7.1 in that aspect. So for Tyler Huntley, who we've documented his deep ball struggles, he's not necessarily a quarterback that can consistently push the ball down the field. I think this would be a really good week for them to maybe try to open up that deeper part of the field. You're missing some speed element in Devin Duvernay now with him not being available, but maybe if you can get a big play to Deshaun Jackson early on to set a tone, set momentum there, I think that'd be good. But I do hear you with the weather, so I feel like this could be a very heavy dose of the ground game for Baltimore, which I think a lot of people wanted to see last week, but obviously the fourth quarter was not very run heavy for Baltimore. So going into this game, I mentioned Atlanta's pass defense, Q, where their run defense has actually been it's been okay this year. They're 11th in the NFL, 4.3 yards per attempt given up for Atlanta, but the Ravens' run offense has just been absolutely incredible this year, as it has been for multiple years now. The Ravens are the second best rush offense in the NFL, 5.3 yards per attempt on the ground. Are you expecting a heavy dose of J.K. Dobbins against Edwards in this one?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. I mean, this is the strength of your offense right now. This is the weakest version of bully ball we're going to get, so let's have it. You don't have Lamar to hold safeties and kind of freeze linebackers, but you do have, guys that are getting down the field and feeling their aggressive, sifting through the line. I think the offensive line, obviously, they like firing off the ball and being the aggressors. I think it sets a really physical tone. Um, you know, we just know that they need to score once they get into the red zone. That's the bottom line. I know JK talked about, once his speed is back and all the things, but, it's just highly improbable that we're going to see it this year. I obviously do sports performance training and all the things, and I'm just saying, like, the way in which the body operates and at this juncture of the game, and you're talking about a guy who is playing a collision sport. It's extremely difficult to feel like he's just going to be this home run threat. Now, give me those 30, 40 yarders, and if you're inside the 30-yard line, then that's a house call. So, I think they need to be as productive as they can be running the ball, but finish in the red zone. That's going to be the thing. I think, from elephant in the room, it's the groove of when you call pass plays. It's the groove of the concepts and the timing of it. So, Greg, he has to, like, Giro. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around his rhythm of play calling. And that is going back to when Lamar was healthy. Yes, there have been drops. No question about it. Yes, there have been missed opportunities by Lamar as well. So, sure, blame goes all the way around, but the play rhythm of the calls, when you throw the quick game, when you have, not necessarily isolated routes, but backside throws to have at your disposal, to have, tight end seam route concepts, all those things. That, to me, I'd love to see it be better.
And I know that for Roman there, like, situational play calling has been an issue for the past couple of seasons, where you mentioned the whole groove aspect of things. Just when do you call certain things? When do you go away from certain things? I get being down 2 scores late in the game. You want to throw the ball, push the ball down the field, but the Ravens average 3.8 yards per pass compared to 7.1 yards per attempt on the ground. So a 40-yard completion is doing the same thing that a 4-yard run is in that situation. Plus, the Ravens, the way they were running, had much more of a chance of breaking off a big one, it felt like, on the ground than through the air. So I think for Baltimore, they can't go away from their identity. I think sometimes they try to be too cute with some of this stuff, try to get the pass game going, when, look, this is a running football team. They can throw the football, but I think they have to open it up, especially with the weapons that are now unavailable, with Lamar Jackson being unavailable too. But speaking of those weapons, Q, Rashad Bateman done, Devin Duvernay done. You have to have guys step up now in a big situation. We know this pass offense goes through the tight ends and running backs. I know you've talked about that many times here on this show, but with no Devin Duvernay now, and obviously we haven't had Rashad Bateman here for a while, which wide receiver do you think has to step up the most?
I mean, the crazy thing about it, I think, I hate to say it, but Sammy Watkins, like, okay, he's back. He knows the offense. He's familiar with G-Row. But he hasn't really been, healthy at pretty much, I think, was his rookie year or second year or whatever. It was the only year he really had a full year. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and get injured. No. But what I am saying, though, from all right, here we go. Let's, bruh, we need you. We need you now. So at the same time, I think Deshaun Jackson, it was really cool to see the one play that in the Pittsburgh game. I'll go back to that game where they were in that tight formation and he released off the line of scrimmage and the safety kind of got lost. And for a minute there, I wasn't sure if Snoop was going to find him, but then all of a sudden he saw him, he found him, threw it down there. I think it's those plays like that and more from Deshaun Jackson that can really help out this offense. Not necessarily a red zone type of a route where Deshaun Jackson, maybe we talk about roles and roles of receivers. That's not his role. The role we want to see is what we saw, like I said, in Pittsburgh, or like what we saw when it was Lamar and it was in Jacksonville when he was pushing the ball down the field deep to him.
Right. And now you have even other guys. Demarcus Robinson now pretty much steps into your de facto number one role because of the way that he's been playing and the usage that he's had so far. He needs, he's running a little loose with the ball. He has to tuck that thing in a little bit because he had 2 fumbles.
You know what? It's crazy because see, this is a thing. Film. Everything is on film. You held out that ball so loose that guys like, oh, you're going to do that? Okay, watch. Now, it's hilarious because, pot calling kettle black, this dude over here, we playing against the Tennessee Titans, and Tennessee is playing a whole bunch of man-to-man, and we're running routes that were getting me open. I'm snatching the ball out of the air, and I'll never forget the one time I had the ball, and I was just holding it out, dangling it, like, oh, yeah, I got it. And the next time through, I snatched the ball out of the air, and I'm dangling it. Boop, he popped it through, and I'm like, ooh, oh boy, don't do that again, Qadry. So I learned a harsh lesson that, yeah, you know what? I'm sure guys on the sideline were like, hey, the DB that was covering me, they go over to him and like, yo, Duran, I think you can punch that ball out because he's not securing it. Same thing with DeMarcus. DeMarcus was getting a little fancy with the spices and feeling himself. And sure enough, Cleveland was like, oh, okay, we're going to take the ball. And sure enough, we saw what would happen. So you're absolutely right. Hey, I didn't mean to cut you off in that regard, but it made me think real quick that you got to be extra careful if you're DeMarcus Robinson.
No, you do, and it is crazy because the play that he did, the second one where he got the ball punched, he had 2 hands on the ball, and it looked like he actually had it secure there. So, I mean, credit to Cleveland's defender who ended up getting the ball out. But he was running like just kind of dangling the ball for the last couple of weeks. I'm sure they might have seen that and said, hey, maybe we can make a play on the ball, and that's what they did. But the Ravens' defenses love their turnovers so far this year. We'll be talking about that in the second segment, how they can stop Desmond Ridder, Drake London, and that Falcons offense. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is sponsored by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. Browse the used selection of vehicles just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., UK, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Or find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from point A to point B. You can even test drive a new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every ship is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring into cars and find your drive at Turo.com. And I have a very important message. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high can get you a DUI. And even if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers, even your parents, everyone can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not, because the bottom line is if you feel different, you drive different, and driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI, paid for by the NHTSA. We are back, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allsteiger still here with Qadry Ismail. And Q, I know from the defense's perspective, I mean, they've been playing great. You can't really put a lot of fault on this defense. The fourth quarter in Jacksonville is maybe the only real blemish. They did get the ball moved up and down a little bit on them against Cleveland, but over the past 5 games, Q, they've only given up 13.4 points per game, but the offense for Baltimore's only scored 13.8 points per game. So the defense is trying to drag this offense across the finish line in these games, but now you're going up against Desmond Ridder, another rookie quarterback. Historically, Baltimore's had success against rookie quarterbacks, especially teams that have not seen them before and players who have not seen them before. So do you expect an aggressive game out of Mike Macdonald in this defense?
I expect a Mike Macdonald game plan. He's selective with his blitzing. And we saw, some really cool aggressive looks. We saw Kyle Hamilton coming off the edge, obviously. The way in which they disguised the looks, you could just see where, for a second, Cleveland's like, oh, right, we forgot about him. Um, it's the strategic way in which he calls defense in the Wink Martindale era. So we're not seeing the zero coverage. We're seeing some zone schemes where he zones it up on one side, expects you to look to that side and have it, man to man, and then bring a blitz off the back end. I think little things like that really, in my mind, sets the tempo and tenor of the defense. It'll be interesting how he covers up, if you will, the loss of Marcus Peters. Whether or not they are overly aggressive or they're going to send help over. I believe what Stevens is the other corner. I think he's going to be, called upon to really hold his own. Maybe Marcus Williams is a little bit more attentive to his side. Maybe they put, Marlon on an island. So there's some different looks that I'd be curious to see how it is. But aggressiveness comes when you are able to cover, and then you don't have, that up the middle push with Calais Campbell. So that's going to be also something that can affect the Mike McDonald's schemes as far as what he sees and what he feels can be aggressive. Because remember, pushing the ball down the field is what the Falcons like to do, and they do it extremely well. So this is going to be a big test.
Yeah, and I know that this is no longer a live by the blitz, die by the blitz defense, right? Where McDonald picks and chooses his spots, and I think does so very strategically. But get this, Q, the Falcons, they have a top 5 rush offense this year. They are averaging 5 yards per attempt. That is 4th in the NFL. You have guys like Cordell Patterson there and Tyler Algier there who have done really, really well. Do you feel like this could be a game where Baltimore's run defense once again puts the stops on the opponent's ground game and forces the opposing offense into that one-dimensionality, if that's a word? But anyway, that one-dimensionality to maybe just say, hey, we're going to make it throw the ball because your run game is not going to work?
Well, that's all up to Roquan and Patrick. Those are the two guys that kind of have really redefined this defense run schemes and stopping any up the middle threat. The sideline to sideline aspect of how they've been able to, either it's a tackle for loss or it's a minimal gain, forcing them out of their comfort zone is going to be a premium. But if, again, you put a lot of attention to that run game, I think that's what the big boy and big ball shots down the field come into play. You got to be careful. So, yeah, stopping them up front, maybe not necessarily having to invite another defender down in the box because Roquan and Patrick are doing their thing. That's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. And obviously the loss of Calais Campbell for this one is a big one, but I think Baltimore is equipped to, I think, make that loss not as big. It is a big one, and he's a big guy too, don't get me wrong. But I think that what you're looking at is guys like Justin Metabike and Broderick Washington, Travis Jones, and Brent Urban, and some of those guys really stepping up to the plate. But Q, I talked with Aaron Freeman, who's the host over at Locked On Falcons. We did a crossover yesterday. I asked him about Marcus Williams and if he was excited to see what Desmond Ridder could do against Marcus Williams, and he said, no, he's not, because he knows what he can do from his New Orleans Saints days. How big is Marcus Williams in this game?
I think he has to be on point. Marcus, it's his just, it's a confidence and a swagger that it's refreshing to hear. And I think that's something that, from the bigger picture of what he needs to do to help this team kind of, put the clamps on the Falcons, I'd love to see a pick 6 by him. Just man, whether them deep ball shots, whether or not, okay, you're going to throw it, bam, pick it off, and then use his former receiver skills to take it to the house. That's what I'm looking for, because deep balls, we even saw it in Pittsburgh. He just has a knack, for being in the right place, right time, and his ball skills are second to none.
Yeah, he's been. I mean, 5 years, $70 million for him seems like a steal. Like he has been one of the
Yeah.
one of the bargains of free agency, and to give him all that money and still have him be a bargain, that's saying something. But Hugh, I know we've talked about LFO. We talked about him a bit a couple weeks ago. He's kind of getting himself in the stat sheet a little bit more here. Half a sack here, a sack there. Do you feel like he's starting to turn a corner?
I think he is. I think the scheme of having him over on the tight end side, and I think with, again, the Roquan Smith effect of knowing that you can't necessarily just go push to the outside because you got to worry about, the run fit of Roquan. I think it's been really helpful, and I think that's what frees him up to kind of unleash and go. So I'm hoping that it's coming in bunches, and this is the time of the year where it can come in bunch. We need you. We need you to go ahead and get to the quarterback.
Now let's talk about his high school teammate, David Ajabo, who played one defensive snap. Do you expect a little bit more of an uptick in workload for him, or do you think he maybe will hover around like 1 to 5 snaps for this year while he gets acclimated, and then maybe next year we see the big workload?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I absolutely can. I can see where it's I won't say trial by fire. Trying to think of the analogy to give him, but you know, giving him a chance just to get out there and get his feet wet and feel out what his body can and cannot do is really important because he's a long term project. He's your guy that you want to hone in and develop because JPP is not going to be there. At some point in time, Justin Houston is not going to be there, and so yeah, you're going to need him for the long haul too. So I think you know let him go out there and just figure it out and feel it out, rather than have the high expectations of multiple snaps and in critical situations.
Right. Now, certainly a long haul. We still have a couple of regular season games to go, but the playoffs, they are around the corner. So in our final segment, we'll talk about the playoff situation and how confident we are in this Ravens team come playoff time if everything were to start on Saturday. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is sponsored by BetOnline, and BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball in the World Cup. They've got it all over at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So for me, who is a Denver Nuggets guy in the NBA, I always look over there to see if there are any good props that I can bet on. Head over to the website, lay your mobile device, learn more. Bet online where the game starts. We are back, rounding out Locked On Ravens, our final segment. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail and Q. The Week 15 loss to Cleveland was bad for multiple different reasons. Obviously, just the way the game went was not fun, but also you have Cincinnati winning. They beat Tampa Bay in Week 15, so that places them now 1 game ahead of the Ravens. Now, Baltimore still, at the time of this, does have the head-to-head tiebreaker, but as we've been talking about, it probably is all going to come down to Week 18 if everything holds, if the Ravens win 2, and if the Bengals win 2. And there's a question about just how confident. We'll start with just the Week 18 game in particular, but assuming it does come down to it, Baltimore wins both their games, Cincinnati wins both their games. With everything the Ravens are right now and what you have seen, are you confident with them heading into Cincinnati to play that Bengals team?
No. So the fandom in me comes out when I say that. From the tactical aspect of things, you're looking at Joe Burrow, playing some of his best football with a lot of poise. His offensive line, they've been shored up. His receivers, once or twice they fail him, but Jamar Chase and Higgins and company, they it's only once or twice, because all the other times, it comes in waves. Like, it just big play, big run, big play, touchdown. And it their defense is like feeding and feeding well. They too feel very good about how they move and how they do their thing. This is a formidable opponent, and I talked about it in the preseason. Where we were talking about who's, as far as AFC North, who's the team? And I was like, yeah, the team that nobody's talking about. And now all of a sudden, they're looking more and more like the AFC champions that got them to the big dance. And offensively, defensively, special teams, you know what? They got down by 17, and they just roared right back and didn't even blink against Tampa Bay. I mean, they mud stomped Tampa Bay, and so yeah, Cincinnati, they're the real deal.
They are, and they were struggling early in the season. They had a couple of really tough losses early. Baltimore's defense, credit to them, they stifled Joe Burrow for most of that game, especially in the first half. But I need to see something from this pass offense that can show me that, hey, despite how well the defense is playing right now for Baltimore, these offensive performances, the red zone, the play clock, the play calling, etc., the run game's awesome. Like, they're doing their thing. But you have to have some semblance of a pass game to get past the Buffaloes and the Kansas Cities and the Cincinnatis and all those teams. So I think Baltimore can win in Week 18, but they have to show me something over these next couple of weeks, pass offense-wise and even coaching-wise a little bit too, to make me feel a little more confident in them moving forward. Because the run game, I'm confident in that. The defense, I'm confident in that too. But it all has to be a well-oiled machine, especially come playoff time when you can afford very, very little mistakes in that time.
It's so interesting you're saying it in that regards, because I think it's more for me, it's complementary football. And so now within the offense, it's not the complementary football. With Lamar Jackson in there, and you have the potential to play some really good complementary football. And what I mean by that is, his ability to push the ball down the field, the play action game. Obviously, he sticks that ball out there, and now all of a sudden it's a power QB run or QB sweep, or it's an RPO. Like that right there is where he makes things so dangerous, and his offense so dangerous. But it's the complementary side of it all, getting into the red zone, scoring, putting points on the board, the balance attack of knowing when to run it, when to throw it from a play calling aspect. It all builds up, and if you don't do it right, well, yeah, you might make the playoffs indeed and all that, but you also are going to be on the outside looking in after the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. The Ravens miss Lamar in such a bad way right now, in the worst way right now. Because look, has Lamar been the best quarterback in the NFL this year? No, he hasn't been. Has he struggled? Sure. I mean, absolutely he has. But I think he's still one of the best quarterbacks in this league, and he gives you so much, both from his ability to push the ball down the field, his dynamic ability both as a thrower and as a runner. He gives you so much, and I think we're starting to see a lot of that shining through the cracks here, where you just this would have happened if Lamar was on the field, or that would have happened if Lamar was on the field. So getting him back opens up a lot. But again, the pass offense was struggling a bit with him. So I need to see it from everyone. It's not just Lamar. It's not just the play calling. It's everybody combined here. But Hugh, speaking of playoffs, is there a team right now that you would favor Baltimore playing? Is there a team you're looking at and you're saying, oh yeah, this is what I want for Baltimore's first round matchup?
Well, shoot. The way Jacksonville now all of a sudden is playing, they might be, winning their division, and that means they're in the playoffs. So it'd be great to see them again. I think that would be a great matchup. Why not? That I would say Jacksonville.
It depends where they finish, because if they win the North, they're going to be the 3 seed most likely, because the AFC South winner's locked into 4. So if they're the 3 seed, the 6 seed would either be, well, Cincinnati will probably be 5. So then you're looking at maybe Miami or maybe the Chargers or maybe Jacksonville. You're right, maybe those guys. But if the Ravens finish at 5, then they're probably playing Tennessee, who just lost Ryan Tannehill for the season. I think they can beat Tennessee. Do you think they can beat Tennessee?
Oh God, they could beat Tennessee. Oh yeah, no, I think from a Derrick Henry kind of mindset, you just have to be in position to not get brutally stiff armed, and then you just got to take advantage of the opportunities from a defensive standpoint. Their defense can give up some big plays too. They've really had their issues in that area. I absolutely, they match up well enough, and psychologically, they have the wherewithal to go against Tennessee and beat Tennessee.
Yeah, I think so too. But if this team I've said all season that for me, I think a successful year for them is at least the AFC Championship. If the Ravens don't make it that far, if they are a first round out or if they are a second round out, how big of a disappointment of a season is that for you?
Huge, 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 huge. For a variety of reasons, because now you're going right back into the offseason, and what is it? The Lamar Jackson contract talk. How's it going to work out? Is he going to be re-signed? How much guarantees you going to give him? What's Steve Bisciotti thinking or not thinking? Franchise tag, is that going to upset him? There's so many scenarios that you want to feel like you gave it your all, and put yourself in making plays position, defensively, offensively, special teams, whatever, to get to that AFC Championship game. Right now, the way it looks, I don't think that they're that caliber of a team. So, yeah, this is going to be making for an interesting offseason. Could they get hot? Absolutely. But right now, boy, this is not looking good.
Right, and I'm sure we'll talk about this topic many times, I'm sure, throughout the next couple of weeks and couple of months as the playoffs get here and as they come and go. But yeah, for me, it's complacency. They've been in the wild card round, they've gotten eliminated there the past couple of years. Sometimes they've made the divisional round, they've gotten eliminated there too. They haven't made the AFC Championship with Lamar. They haven't made it since they won the Super Bowl. So they have to get back to that and not be complacent with, oh, we made the playoffs again, but the wild card exit but divisional exit. So that's my whole thing. But let's wrap it all up. Let's go all the way back to you. Atlanta Falcons game, your predictions for this. How do you think it goes?
Yeah, this is interesting because you got a motivated Mark Andrews. It seems like you got a circle the wagons type of a group right now. I would say if I had to predict, it would be a crime for them not to get their 10th win. Score, I'm having the difficulty with. I don't see them putting up more than 17 points. I'll say 17-7.
I went 2017 because if you're getting into 23, 25, that's a little high for this game, I feel like, because again, the offense hasn't scored enough to make you confident to pick them to score 25, 30 plus points. So with Tyler Huntley there, I feel like this is a game that it's not a must win, but at the same time, it kind of is. Like it's kind of both, because after this game, tough divisional matchup in week 17 against Pittsburgh, tough maybe for the division matchup against Cincinnati in week 18. You have to take advantage of this matchup. Atlanta's run defense, it's good, but can you get it going against Atlanta's pass defense, which hasn't been good this year? So for me, I'm going 2017 Ravens. I think they do pick up their 10th win and gives them a little momentum heading into their week 17 matchup at home against Pittsburgh there. But Q, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on with me. And hopefully when we get back next week, this will be a 10-5 football team with a little momentum into Pittsburgh here.
Hopefully. Pittsburgh's going to be looking at that game and be like, oh, y'all punked us at home. We about to return the favor. It's going to be a battle and a half. I think this is going to be interesting how it'll turn out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The divisional matchups for Baltimore, AFC North, always tough rival football. But first, you got to get past Atlanta. That's a game that you cannot overlook in any stretch of the imagination. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Ravens. When we get back here on Monday, we'll be diving into everything that happened in that Ravens and Falcons game. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here on Monday.